soon as I walk in, seeming like
Before dawn on a cold January morning, the quiet stillness of Verona, Mississippi, was broken by a single gunshot. On Lesa Avenue, inside the Lazy Acres trailer park, the life of a young mother came to a sudden and violent end. Her name was Tremya Chermaine Darden. She was just 24 years old. For her family, her friends, and her small son, the moments after that gunshot would mark the beginning of an unthinkable tragedy. For the wider community, it would open a story that raised difficult questions about justice, accountability, and the fragile line between accident and murder. On January 8, 2024, sometime between 3 and 4 in the morning, Verona police officers responded to a 911 call reporting shots fired inside Lazy Acres. What they found was both haunting and devastating. Tremya had been shot in the head. Officers and first responders moved quickly, rushing her from the trailer park to the North Mississippi Medical Center in Tupelo. Despite every attempt at emergency care, her injuries were too severe. Tremya did not survive. The news of her passing rippled out from Tupelo back to her hometown of Okolona, leaving a community reeling. Police immediately identified and detained a suspect at the scene. His name was Dandre Edward Lydale McGinister, 25 years old. He was someone Tremya knew closely. In his first statements to police, McGinister offered an explanation that struck many as both startling and deeply questionable. He told officers that the shooting had been an accident. According to his account, the gun had dropped during an argument, discharging on impact and striking Tremya. But investigators were unconvinced. The severity of the wound, the context of the situation, and the physical evidence did not align neatly with an accidental discharge. Before the day was over, police charged McGinister with first-degree murder. The charge itself was significant. Prosecutors had the discretion to pursue manslaughter or negligent homicide in cases where a shooting might be considered accidental. But here, they pursued the highest level of homicide charge, first-degree murder, implying intent or at least sufficient evidence to show premeditation or depraved disregard for human life. That decision, more than anything, cast immediate doubt on McGinister's story about a dropped gun. It suggested that investigators believed the evidence told a very different story from the one the suspect gave. In court filings and early media reports, another detail surfaced that only added to the gravity of the situation. At the time of Tremya's death, McGinister was already out on a felony bond connected to a separate vehicle case. This meant he was already under court supervision for another criminal matter when the shooting occurred. For many in the community, it underscored a systemic issue. How could someone already facing charges and released on bond find themselves in a position to be involved in another alleged crime, this time with fatal consequences? A judge in Lee County set McGinister's bond at $1 million. It was a reflection of the seriousness of the charge and the perceived risk he posed if released. As of the months and even years following his arrest, no updates on trial proceedings or sentencing have been publicly reported. As of September 2025, the case remains unresolved in the public record, leaving a cloud of uncertainty for Tremya's family and for her son, who now grows up without his mother. To understand the weight of Tremya's loss, we must step back from the police reports and court filings and look at who she was. Born in Okolona, Mississippi, Tremya was just 24 years old when her life was cut short. Her obituary paints the picture of a young woman who was more than just a victim of violence. She was a daughter, a friend, and above all, a mother. At the center of her world was her son, the child she lived for, worked for, and cared for. Friends described her as playful, someone whose laughter filled a room, someone who never missed a chance to help, and someone whose love for her child defined her purpose. In the obituary guest book, those who knew her left words of love and remembrance. Some called her a light, others remembered her as generous and full of life. Those words endure even now as markers of the life she lived and the love she gave. The circumstances of her death, however, raise complex legal and moral questions. When McGinister told police that the gun had simply dropped, it forced prosecutors to make a critical choice. How do you distinguish between an accident and a crime? In criminal law, the answer often comes down to evidence of intent, recklessness, and the nature of the events leading up to the fatal moment. Prosecutors are tasked with evaluating not just what the suspect claims, but what the physical evidence shows. Did the trajectory of the bullet match an accidental discharge? Were there witnesses who contradicted his version of events? Was there any prior history of threats, conflict, or violence that could point toward intent? While prosecutors rarely reveal every detail early in a case, the decision to charge McGinister with first-degree murder instead of a lesser offense indicated that they believed the evidence pointed towards something deliberate, not accidental. For viewers unfamiliar with the legal distinctions, an accidental shooting does not automatically absolve someone from criminal liability. If a person handles a firearm negligently, dropping it, waving it around carelessly, failing to secure it properly, they can still face serious charges if someone is harmed. In Mississippi, as in many states, the difference between manslaughter and murder often comes down to intent and malice. Prosecutors filing a first-degree murder charge against McGinister sent a message that they believed intent, or at the very least, reckless disregard, was present in Tremya's shooting. While the legal process continues slowly, the human story remains immediate. Tremya's death left behind a young son who must now grow up without his mother's presence. For her family, every holiday, every birthday, every milestone is marked not just by absence, but by the knowledge of how violently she was taken from them. The community in Okolona has remembered her as more than a victim. They have spoken of her kindness, her joy, and her role as a mother whose life revolved around her child. In remembering her, they remind us that behind every headline and every court filing is a family forever altered. For Verona and the surrounding communities, the case also casts light on larger issues of violence and accountability. Lazy Acres Trailer Park, the site of the shooting, has often been mentioned in local reporting as a place where violence has touched before. Yet what happened to Tremya was not just a statistic. It was personal, intimate, and devastating. It forces questions about how communities protect vulnerable people, how courts manage defendants already out on bond, and how justice can be both delayed and elusive. As of September 2025, more than a year and a half after Tremya's death, there have been no publicly reported trial outcomes or sentencing updates in McGinister's case. For her family, the lack of closure is painful. Justice delayed feels like justice denied. For the public, it is another reminder of how slowly the criminal justice system can move, particularly in cases where the stakes are so high. But perhaps the most important part of this story is not what remains unresolved, but what is certain. It is certain that Tremya Chermaine Darden was a young mother who deserved to live, to raise her child, and to continue building her life. It is certain that her family, her friends, and her community feel her absence every day. And it is certain that her memory should not be defined solely by the manner of her death, but by the life she lived. As the story of Tremya Darden continues to unfold in courtrooms and news reports, it remains a story about more than legal filings. It is about the fragility of life, the responsibility of justice, and the enduring weight of grief. On that January morning in 2024, a single gunshot ended her life, but her memory continues in the hearts of those who loved her. For them, Tremya's story is not over. It is carried forward every day, in every memory, in every photograph, and in every moment her son takes another step without her by his side. And so we end not with a resolution, but with a reflection. Tremya's case remains open in the public record. Her family still waiting, her community still mourning. For viewers, her story is a reminder that justice is not always swift, but memory endures. Tremya Chermaine Darden was 24 years old. She was a mother, she was a daughter, she was loved, and she should still be here.